Come blast off in my time machine. Third eye feeling like an Visine. Blast off, blast off, blast off, blast off. Come blast off in my time machine. Third eye feeling like an Visine. Blast off, blast off, blast off, blast off. How's it going, everybody? How's it going? We've got a pretty epic, I know I always say that, but this time I really mean it. A really epic show coming up. One of my favorite people, period. And for a variety of reasons. Well, tonight we have Angela Thompson Smith PhD. Angela operates MindWise Consulting out of Boulder City, Nevada. Now, Angela was a staff member at PEAR. From 1987 to 1992, Dr. Smith was employed as a research coordinator with the Bigelow Foundation in Las Vegas, Nevada from 1992 to 1994. Prior to Bigelow, chair in consciousness studies at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, and before the Consciousness Research Laboratory at UNLV, and before the National Institute for Discovery Sciences in Las Vegas, there was the Bigelow Foundation. The foundation carried out multiple projects, including follow-ups to the Bigelow-funded Roper Report on Unusual Person Experiences, seminars on alternative health and collaborative research at UNLV, sociological field research in Las Vegas, Central Nevada, Alabama, and other places, research assistants to researchers such as Bud Hopkins in New York, and a radio show, Area 2000, the forerunner of Art Bell's Coast to Coast program. Area 2000 featured many experts from the fields of ufology, alternative health, alternative energy, and parapsychology, and ran through early 1994. Over the past 10 years, Angela has worked as a private contractor for individuals, businesses, and organizations around the United States and abroad. Dr. Smith was ordained as a shamanic practitioner in 2010 following decades of training and experience. Dr. Smith was also trained in remote viewing by two ex-Stargate remote viewers, Paul Smith and Lynn Buchanan. She now works out of MindWise Consulting out of Boulder City, Nevada, and she specializes in research, training, and instruction. Definitely read her books. They are by far some of the most intriguing, intellectually, I think, intriguing books, at least to me. Amazing books. I haven't read one that I wasn't just blown away by. So please support Angela Thompson Smith, and without any further ado, let's get down to it. Hold up, just about forgot. One of the most important things that if I don't mention it, we may not exist, which that is donations. If you guys want to donate to the Hero Paranormal podcast, even if it's $1, $10, whatever, you can do it a one-time way, which is going to HEROparanormal.podbean.com. You just sign up for the recurring. It just says like $1 or whatever per month. And let's say you just want to donate $1, you just do $1, and then afterwards you just go to manage account and hit stop recurring payment, and you're done. You did it one time. And that's how easy it is. We could just use all the funding we could get because we are funding all kinds of stuff. It takes cash to do these podcasts, unfortunately, and time, which is also money. And we are doing research, which is like very real. We're involved with Space Wolf research, which is costing an arm and a leg, but we're getting way more than an arm and a leg's worth of evidence, so it's totally worth it. Anyway, hop over to HEROparanormal.com. There's a donate button. There's also a subscribe button. It's really the same button. You tap it, you give whatever you want. You can be recurring $1 a month, or you can just give $1 1 month, or $10 one time, or whatever you want. It's also, if you are a patron, you get special content. There are some patron-only podcasts, which are very, very, in my opinion, the best. And speaking of the best, let's get down to the podcast we're having tonight. And that is one of the favorite people I have met in my existence here on this planet, and that's Angela Thompson Smith, PhD. She started out in social work. She is a hero of the people. She was a nurse. She is a hero of health. She's a researcher like none other. She's given so much back to the community. And anyway, let's just get to it. Angela Thompson Smith, PhD. Angela.
How are you?
Not bad, not bad. Thanks so much for taking some time out of your day and talking with us.
Oh, you're welcome.
It's great. I'm very excited about, I wanted to talk about some past projects and some future projects that you have. Among those, tactical remote viewing. And what you could tell us, what you could tell us about what's going on and.
Yeah, well, I'm always busy. I'm always doing something. Yeah, well, the latest book out, of course, as you mentioned, is Tactical Remote Viewing. That was an account of working with a New York business client for 9 years, and all the work not all the work because I couldn't post some of it because it was proprietary, but some of the more interesting cases that we worked on, and I helped him sell his business during the last recession, 2008-9, and the fact that we actually alerted him as remote viewers to the coming recession, which he didn't believe at the time, but he did as it went on.
That's interesting because a lot of the private sector, it seems, is more open to, if not engaged in, remote viewing in some way, shape, or form at some level, having remote viewers on deck. I've heard of a few corporations, but there's also government projects, it sounds like, in the past that have also done this. Isn't this correct, Angela?
They've been very cautious. The business end, there are more businesses now employing remote viewers, either as freelance consultants or on a long-term basis, like I work with my clients. Government tends to come in when there's an emergency. For example, after 9/11, I was tasked by somebody who called himself Navy Frank, and I never knew who he was, and all the feedback I got was that was helpful. That it felt good to assist.
That's great. It's just so your knowledge and everything of remote viewing is so vast. I have so many questions I want to hop on. Another one of your books that is one of my favorites is one that I believe Ingo Swann actually wrote the foreword, Remote Perceptions.
Right, and I am currently just republishing it. It was out of publication for many years, and I'm just republishing it. The Kindle version is up on Amazon, and I should have the renewed paperback version up sometime this week.
Oh, great. Yeah,
Yeah.
It's such a neat book. I think the targets are great, and I think it's kind of controversial, but and experimental. And I think that's what's so neat about you is that you have been involved in a lot of controversial and experimental projects. I don't want to speak for you, but could you give us a little bit of insight into some of those?
Well, the longest one was at the Pear Lab at Princeton University, the Princeton Engineering Anomalous Research Lab, that was studying remote perception and human-computer interaction from an intuitive psychic basis. They were there for 30 years, and very few people knew about it. The public was becoming more aware of the team and the work there. Professor Robert John, who was Professor of Aerospace Studies, was the lead, and Brenda Dunn was the office manager. And as I say, I worked there for 5 years and participated in many of the experiments, and that has all been written up. It's out there. If you go to Pear Inc., PEARINC, you should be able to find some of their reprints. So that was the major research that I took part in. And there's always, I never know what's coming across my desk. I've done work for a physics lab. I've done work for a NASA manager, not officially for NASA, but one of the managers. So projects like that come across my desk, and I'm always happy to participate.
That is neat. The program, well, I wanted to, first of all, if it's okay, I'd like to read something out of your Remote Perceptions book that I thought was pretty interesting. Speculation that the CIA utilized RV information comes from an article by Douglas Waller in the Time magazine dated December 11th, 1995. Waller wrote that the Defense Intelligence Agency recruits psychics who were creating accurate pictures of Soviet submarine construction hidden from U.S. spy satellites, and a 1993 Pentagon representative said psychics had correctly drawn 20 tunnels being built in North Korea near the demilitarized zone. And I think we run into this a lot. There's been quite a few cases that, at least I'm not quite normal. I like to do a lot of research when it comes to these things. And there's quite a few cases, Angela, that, where the government has utilized, remote viewers to, even if they have a plan, to just kind of fine tune certain portions of that plan. Isn't that correct?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. They try and go for people who have a track record. There are thousands of people now who've been trained in remote viewing, many of them just to the basic level. People like myself who've gone on into operational work, which has been my new forward thrust, tend to get tasked from time to time. Unfortunately, some of the more sensitive projects, if I sign non-disclosures or contracts, I'm not allowed to talk about them.
Mm-hmm.
So I try and put as many projects as I can into my books, and my book SEER, S-E-E-R, contains projects for the last 30 years of remote viewing that I participated in.
That is great. And just a reminder to our audience, like the quality and the different, I love the different types of books that you have. There's another book, Columbia Quest, which... Yeah. Could you tell our listeners a little bit about that?
Yeah. In my 20s, when I was a lot younger, I volunteered with a British organization to go down to Colombia, South America, and I worked at an orphanage as a nurse social worker. But I didn't just do hands-on, day-to-day stuff. The missionaries there would send me off by bus up to Bogota because we were in the foothills of the Andes. And in Bogota, then I'd get another bus out into the boondocks, out into the Andes, to go pick up and collect birth certificates and other information about the children for adoptive parents. So I never knew where I was going to be sent. I never knew. I had to find out which buses to take. So I had lots of adventures while I was down there. And finally found all my journals and letters home that my parents had kept. And then I got a disc of photos of one of the orphans who'd gone back to the orphanage. And this spurred me to write about my adventures down there. So that's basically the book.
Yes, that is so neat. And bringing you back to like just the amount and quantity of your work, I recently had some really intriguing, just a snippet of intriguing information sent to me by someone, and I posted it, and I immediately, like when you said, "Hey, this is me," I'm like, "Oh, of course it is." And it was so well written, and it had to do with animal mutilation studies, and it was just so well written, and that's what's so nice is like and open-minded, like when it comes to your research, which is, good.
Thank you.
Absolutely. The other thing I wanted to ask you about was if you could tell our audience, I believe do you still do classes and offer training?
I do. I try and offer one class a month, a third weekend of each month, and it's in applications remote viewing. So I don't teach actually remote viewing as such, the controlled remote viewing protocol, but I bring new people and other trained people up to speed with the protocols over 2 days so that they have a working knowledge of what they're supposed to be doing. And you yourself, Ryan, took part in this, so you know. The third day, I pick an actual target. For example, we looked at the fire, this last class, we looked at the fire at in France, you know, the big cathedral, Notre Dame, and looking to see if it was a natural fire or was actually terrorist-related. And the students do 3 sessions and finally arriving as a team at a conclusion. And we concluded it was accidental, it was a fuse box. So we're waiting now on feedback for that. Ah. But yes, I teach here in Boulder City, Nevada, and you can always contact me to see if there are places in the class.
Absolutely. That is great. The other thing I wanted to ask you is you recently did, I believe, a class with Paul Smith. Is that correct?
Yeah, I just got back. My trainer, Major Paul Smith, Paul H. Smith, who's up in Cedar City, Nevada, he was one of the original military Stargate remote viewers for 9 years. And I felt very privileged to have been trained by him in remote viewing. And every now and again, he'll ask me to go up when he needs assistance. So I just spent the last week assisting him with one of his basic classes. And it's like mental boot camp, his classes. Mm-hmm. My classes are tame compared to his because you write essays, you have to do homework, long hours, practically all day, just working. And it was tremendous. I benefit from it because I get a little bit of course correction. And I love being up in Cedar City. So I just got back last night.
Oh, that's great. Paul's a great guy. That is neat.
Yeah.
And getting to there's it looks like some future. I don't know how much I can say or not, but I believe there's some future possible television here.
Yeah, I was invited out to LA a couple of months ago by the History Channel. Prometheus Productions was doing some filming for them for a new series that's being hosted by William Shatner, and it's called The Unexplained Mysteries of the Mind. And I think mine is the 7th segment. It's going to be aired this coming Friday, the 30th, and it's mainly about my work, the work of some other remote viewers, the Nevada Remote Viewing Group that I work with, and mainly about the DJ murder mystery case that we worked on. So that's going to be on Friday evening, the 30th, on the History Channel.
That is exciting, very exciting. And
I'm nervous.
Oh gosh, it's I can't wait. I can't wait to see it.
Yeah. So I never know. I'm sure they're going to do a wonderful job with it, but I still get nervous until it's actually aired. Absolutely.
Another interesting thing that I wanted to ask you about was the if it's okay if I read the animal mutilation study that I previously mentioned.
Oh, sure.
Okay. Yeah. Let's see here. Make sure I got the right. Yep, that's the one. In the fall of 1992, when we visited the Nevada test site, someone in the group asked a question about whether cattle had been ranched at the test site during the nuclear tests. We were told that there had been cattle at the test site and various parts of the animal were removed when they died. The rest was barbecued. We were told that there were no longer test cattle at the test site. However, multiple unusual cattle deaths, called cattle mutilations, had been occurring all over the country. including the counties surrounding the test site. It seemed that many of these unusual cattle deaths had occurred near military and government installations. And you go on to mention a little bit where we go into some other things, but I found that very interesting that there is a possible connection there.
Yeah, that was what I discovered. I wrote about that in an older book called Diary of an Abduction that's still available, used copies on Amazon, but I'm going to rewrite it this summer. Well, summer's almost over, but maybe the fall. But this was a tour that I did, a trip that I did when I first started working. When I came to Las Vegas, I was working with Robert Bigelow, and I got included in a group of university folks that were going up to the test site. And it was eye-opening. It was fantastic. We were shown locations that weren't open to the general public. We saw the bee tunnels that were way up the north of the test site. Just an amazing experience. And I took the opportunity to ask questions while I was there, because I'm kind of nosy. And I wrote up I did it in journal form, because I write my journals about interesting stuff, and they end up usually in my books.
That's fantastic. I like that, and I'm very glad that you mentioned Robert Bigelow, in fact, because that brings me to the next little snippet of writing having to do with the same animal mutilation study. And it goes on to say, Robert Bigelow was adamant that the cattle mutilations were solely the result of extraterrestrial interference with the cattle. He would not envisage any other explanation. I preferred to keep an open mind. His argument was that we had no technology that could account for the cauterized cuts and open wounds on these animals. Or if we did, it would be too heavy to carry out into the field. Since then, I have seen devices in engineering magazines regarding portable medical technologies. For example, Phillips Laboratories, located at Kirkland Air Force Base in New Mexico, had developed a device called the MedPen. And it goes on to like an agricultural website and how it's described. But it's fascinating that some of these things that we considered science fiction in not that long ago are possible now. And it's getting more difficult. I believe that there is very real phenomena taking place in our skies, etc., on the ground. And however, it is becoming more and more difficult to discern that from actual technology.
Yeah. Yes, I always like to keep an open mind on the sources of things. And when you think that I wrote that back in 2001, imagine what has been advanced since then.
It's just mind-blowing. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So fascinating.
Yeah, I was also sent out by Robert Bigelow to Fife, Alabama, because they were having a huge amount of cattle mutilations taking place. This was like around 92, 93. And I spoke to, I went and interviewed a whole bunch of people because Bigelow was interested in, what was going on here, and wrote up a report for him. But I found a lot of similarities in the sites that mutilations were taking place. Sometimes, more often near a military installation, although they're all over the place. The location, the ground surface, chalky and flint. And so there were lots of correlations, and all that's in Diary of an Abduction.
Wow, very neat. A particular project, and I hope it's okay if I ask you about it. It's has to do with a female pilot. Are you free to discuss that one, Angela?
The female pilot, I'm not sure. Can you give me a little bit more?
Yes. Let's see. It was around wartime, and she, let's see, I don't know. I believe there was something, and I could be wrong, that it came out on the History Channel, something that validated a previous remote view that you had tasked yourself to do. But it...
I don't know. I need to go back and remind myself because there are so many cases.
Right. But I was fascinated with your accuracy.
It's nice that there's validation.
Yes, there was.
Oh, Amelia Earhart.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, yes, of course. Can I talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's my daughter's. Yeah. That's my daughter's name. So you can talk about Amelia Earhart all night. Yeah. It's a very interesting case. Yeah.
Well, I was tasked on 2 different occasions by 2 different professionals on what happened to Amelia. Where did she end up? And what about her co-pilot, Fred Noonan, and their plane, the Electra? Big mystery there. And the first remote viewing I did, I saw them landing on an atoll, and not because they'd run out of fuel, but they needed a better communication point for their radio. And then they were picked up by the Japanese and taken by a small boat out to a larger boat, and then taken to another larger island where they were imprisoned. And at the time, I was told, no, that's complete nonsense, that's not true, it can't be true. So it was put on hold for a while, and then when I was tasked again, I found the same information, and I gave another group that I work with, the Nevada Remote Viewing Group, the same project, and they found similar and more information, which I presented at one of our RV conferences. And again, people were saying, no, that can't be true, because even though the Japanese were in the area, it was thought that her plane, Amelia's plane, had gone down and sunk, and Amelia and Fred had died. So recently, in a History Channel documentary, a group went out. First of all, they went to the archives, the National Archives in Washington, D.C., and found documentation that Amelia was a prisoner. She was a prisoner on Saipan Island. She was a prisoner of the Japanese, and they're actually still looking for the remains of the plane. And the thought was that she had died there on Saipan. So, and there was so much in the documentary that validated all of our remote viewing data that it was very gratifying.
Mm-hmm. I think that's such an amazing case. Just such an amazing... Even when everybody was telling you that you were wrong, you stuck to your guns and ended up being right. And that was really neat.
Yeah, I don't mind being wrong. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. But I felt strongly about the data and just kept it, until we got feedback.
It's fascinating. I wanted to also ask you, Angela, about a couple of kind of more mainstream, I guess, topics, kind of sort of having to do with more fringe-like topics, such as the social and political impact of like the To the Stars Academy and the work that they're doing, and what you know about that, or what you think about that.
Well, I know as much as the average person, except I know some of the folks who are in it, such as Al Budoff. And I've been following along, hoping, that this is, and having high expectations of the project. Hal Puthoff, who is one of the main characters in this new venture, I've known him since Princeton days when I was working there, which was in the late 1980s. And I consider him one of the most trustworthy and honest people that I've ever come across. He's in his 80s now. He's still working full time. In fact, we had a a video podcast with him when I was up in Cedar City. He always talks to the students over Skype. And so it was really nice to be in touch with him. So I don't know many of the other characters that are involved, but because Hal is involved, I feel that gives it some validation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that I can agree with you there. No question that he is no joke. Another topic that I wanted to ask you about is kind of close to home. Not really. It's kind of our backyard, I guess, Angela. Lincoln County here is planning an emergency declaration about this Storm Area 51 event. And I wanted to get your opinion of this wild event, and I just can't believe how much steam it's gathered.
I know. I've been following it, and how it just started off as a joke, actually, a young man making a joke on one of his groups, and it gained momentum. And I'm hoping they'll turn it into a positive effort. Mm-hmm. And I think there will be a lot of people going up there. I hope they don't try and storm Area 51 because there are going to be some injuries. Mm-hmm. I don't think, they are well protected, and as evidenced by the signposts that are out there and the security. But I think it draws attention to the point that there is so much secrecy and perhaps a lot of unnecessary secrecy, and there could be a greater amount of disclosure. And then efforts like this wouldn't be necessary because it would be, I know not everything has to be disclosed, but it's time, I think, that there is a more measured disclosure to the public so that people don't feel they have to storm Area 51 to get information.
That's right. And you're absolutely right. I think Jeremy Corbell is actually doing some important and pretty timely stuff involving this Storm Area 51 movement, and he's basically trying to, on the lowdown, he's just trying to steer them clear of any sort of that happening. And he's, I think, doing a very noble thing and turning it into kind of a get-together, more off-site, where he's going to have Bob Lazar and show his Area 51 and Flying Saucers movie. And I see that as more positive, and I think kudos to him for that.
Yes, I've heard that they're going to make it into almost like a Woodstock kind of event. Right. Yeah.
Yeah, because
I'm
Yeah. No, please go ahead.
What I'm hoping and what I hope they plan during that weekend is that they shut all the programs down at Area 51, send all the personnel home, double up on security, and ride out the storm.
Yeah, it's going to cost a lot of taxpayer money, unfortunately.
Yeah, unfortunately. But things like this happen, and you have to deal with them in the most positive way possible.
That's the truth. It's very neat. I think George Knapp is also going to be there, and if I'm not mistaken. And
okay,
I think yeah,
it could turn out to be a very positive and memorable event, as long as some foolhardy people don't get hurt.
That's what I'm worried about. Yep, exactly. Yeah. I guess another thing I wanted to ask you about is there the unexplained is. Is it going to be you said Friday. It's coming up Friday.
Yeah.
It's airing Friday. What was the channel again?
The History Channel.
History
and it's
Channel.
Called The Unexplained Mysteries of the Mind.
Mysteries of the Mind. That is great. I wanted to ask you, this is more personal stuff. So if you're not okay with it, I completely understand. But you are someone who knew Ingo Swann in a way that most people will never have the opportunity. And
Yeah. Go ahead.
what could you tell us about, Ingo? Because it's just he's such a legendary figure.
Yeah. He's termed the father of remote viewing, but actually he didn't like that title. He's passed away now. But he just, when I asked him one time, he said, "No, I was just the right person in the right place at the right time." And I got to know him because when I was writing Remote Perceptions, I thought, hey, he's in Manhattan, I'm in New Jersey. I wonder if he would write the foreword for my book. So I sent him a preview, and which he read and he liked. And he said, yeah, sure, why don't you come up to Manhattan? We'll have dinner, and we can talk about the book. And because he wanted to meet me in person to make sure I wasn't some crazy person, and which I did. And after that, we had an on and off friendship that if I was in New Jersey or Manhattan, I could call him up and say, hey, Ingo, can I come over and visit? He'd say, sure, come on over. He lived in the Bowery at the time in Manhattan. And I would go over and he would pull out picture target sessions that he had done with his students, some of the military guys, nothing classified. He'd pull out his books, his theories, his sketches, models, and he would say, I thought you might like to see this. So I had almost an unofficial, not a training as such, but definitely an introduction to remote viewing even before I did my training with Paul Smith.
Wow. Yeah, that is such a neat experience to... Yeah.
And he was a bit of a curmudgeon, didn't suffer fools gladly, but I got on really well with him.
That is just so neat. I wanted to ask you also about all of this, I guess, alien disclosure in the media that we see lately. Everything from, ATIP, the To the Stars Academy, to just in general our television stations and, the History Channel, the Ancient Aliens, it seems every channel has at least one. And what are your thoughts on this? Is alien disclosure imminent, or is this something else we're seeing?
Well, two things, actually. One is that out of all of that material, there are always nuggets of truth. And you just have to be discriminating and sift it through the reality hopper and see what falls out. Because there is a lot of fluff as well that goes on, and a lot of not actually made up, but because I'm sure a lot of people really believe what they're saying, but it's not always 100% accurate. But there's nuggets of truth in there. And what I like to do is to gather up the nuggets of truth and see what passes the test. Now, my co-author, I wrote another book called Voices from the Cosmos, and my co-author, C.B. Scott Jones, he's been in this field he's in his 90s now, so he was in this field for about 50 or 60 years, behind the scenes. He's not a well-known name. But he said, we don't need disclosure because disclosure has already happened. What we need now is confirmation of disclosure. So I thought that was an intriguing concept.
That's a very neat way to think of it. And
yeah.
I also wanted to ask you about this. I was fascinated, and not to give out secrets about your courses or anything of that nature, but I was fascinated at how accurate sometimes, if you can just empty your mind, some of this repetitive, this tasking what can take place when you do it correctly. And I remember that there were some targets that I didn't believe for a minute I could actually, hone in on that.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
and since then I wish I wouldn't have doubted. And of the targets that you've been tasked, which can you speak of that you would say were the most rewarding or fascinating?
Um, the major one was the one I'm going to be talking about for the History Channel, which was the Denver DJ murder case. And I was tasked by a colleague who hadn't heard from a friend of his for over a month. So I did my remote viewing just from a coordinate. I didn't know it was his friend at first. The only thing I got was like a serial number. It's a case number. It's called a coordinate, and a series of letters and numbers that is the address of the target, which I sat down and did a remote viewing session, got information, sent it off to my colleague, and he wrote back and said, no, this is a friend of mine. He's missing for a month. He can't possibly be in the water. He can't possibly be dead, et cetera, et cetera. So I said, well, look, let me task a few more of the Nevada remote viewing group, the other remote viewers, and see what they come back with. And they came back with corroborating evidence that indeed there had been a murder and a lot of additional information. When my colleague was out in LA, they saw on TV about a body being dredged up off of Catalina Island. And he said, that's what the remote viewers had told us. That must be, I'm not going to mention names, but that's my colleague. And he called the LA coroner's office. They suspected him at first, but he got some people to vouch for him that he wasn't the murderer. And then he was able to give them the identity of the Denver DJ, which was, very fortunate. Otherwise, he would have been a John Doe for a long time. We were also tasked on the murderer to give a profile, a remote viewing profile of who he was. And then when they felt that he had disappeared, I was tasked with how to go and look at, where did he go? So I saw a landmass that resembled, I was told, Tortola Island, which was where this murderer had offshore banking. He was eventually caught, partly through what we had said and partly through just general people, looking for him and finding him. And he was sentenced. He's now in prison, and for many, many years. So that, for me, was one of the clearest, straightforward data after data after data that was correct, and that actually helped solve the murder case. And I'll just add this at the end. The Las Vegas Sun actually wrote up the case, came and interviewed me, and then they got two of the LA sheriffs to write little blurbs. They interviewed them about how remote viewing had helped solve the case.
Amazing. And
yeah,
with remote viewing, this happens occasionally. Oftentimes, this happens oftentimes in like missing persons cases and things of that nature. And then in other cases, remote viewers will come up with things that sound outlandish, like underground bases, and people laugh. And when you look into some of these things that, some of these targets, and just so our listeners understand, some of these targets are very difficult targets because they could even be protected by other remote viewers if someone were to go that far. And among those, were there any targets that you ever found very difficult to access, Angela?
I found that not usually, but there were a couple of cases that stand out. One of them was as I mentioned, I was tasked after 9/11 by Navy Frank. And when I was doing that session, there was the strong possibility that either other remote viewers or other people knowledgeable about the ability were perhaps monitoring. And because I was doing these solo, and as I was going through my session, I distinctly heard a male voice say, "cretin," which is a derogatory term for a feeble-minded person. But I wrote it down, I just set it aside, and then a little further down in the session, there were other derogatory terms that came through. Now, those aren't the kind of data of words that I normally use, but they definitely came through in the session, and they intruded. So I assumed that there was some other, as I was accessing what we call the signal line, there were intrusions.
Mm-hmm. And those, that is so interesting, because those are, for some listeners that aren't aware, those are sometimes protection systems, or for restricted areas, or for, at least in theory, I've heard people speak of, it's difficult to remote view, for example, the White House or Area 51, or things that make sense like that. And so it's sometimes, I think
it's possible, but I think anything can be remote viewed by a remote viewer with a good natural ability who's been well trained and practiced. Mm-hmm. That they find it easier to get access to those locations.
Mm-hmm. And I wanted to ask you a little bit about if you know, and we a thing of kind of interest lately among some people in the remote viewing community is how much the Soviets and now those who are remote viewing for other purposes, and that it's taken a lot more seriously in other parts of the world for whatever reason than it is in the United States. Do you know any information about that, or why it might be more accepted in other countries?
Absolutely. In Russia, right from the very beginning, even though the American authorities were very skeptical about remote viewing, the Russians have treated it all along as a very viable skill, a very useful skill to train in and develop. And in fact, I was very fortunate to go. I went over to Moscow at the turn, around the 1990s for a conference, and then I met a lot of the people who were in the remote viewing field over there. I was there for 2 weeks, and I've written about it. It's all in my books. Mm-hmm. It's the attitude towards the topic that's different. Whereas here in the States, it's still considered a pseudoscience. It's considered a suspect science. It's not scientific at all. Whereas it's had 40 years of research and development from Stanford Research Institute, Princeton University, the military worked with it for 20 years. And you can't call something pseudoscience that has that pedigree.
Correct. And other countries as
well?
Americans. Uh-huh.
Sorry.
Oh, no, please, go ahead.
Americans are now training Russians. There are Russians coming over, young folk, who want to learn remote viewing, and Paul Smith and other trainers are now training Russians, which is interesting.
That's very interesting. Wow. It's neat how, it adds to the validity of, it's something I believe in. I've interacted up close and personally thanks to you, and it affected me very deeply, and just the ability of one's mind, really.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you saw firsthand how it worked. You came into a weekend class and were part of a small team, and saw for yourself and proved to yourself that it's valid.
Mm-hmm. It is, and I almost want to say whether you believe it or not, but it's almost better if you don't believe it, because chances are your mind could be clearer and more empty without any of that, messing up the signal line. Well, I know that you've got a lot going on, Angela. I really wanted to thank you for coming on and speaking with us about, these things that are just so fascinating, and how intriguing and in depth you're involved. Can you tell us more about any upcoming projects, where people can purchase your books, things of that nature?
Yeah, well, you can purchase my books on Amazon under Angela Thompson Smith, Thompson with a P. And I'm gradually republishing all my books because my publisher kind of dropped the ball back in spring, and I had to learn all the software programs to get everything back up again, which I'm almost done. So everything is up now with new covers, and some have new information in them. Projects, I'm going to be down in Laughlin in November for Paula Harris's conference, UFO and remote viewing conference at, I don't remember, but it's online. If you go to Paula Harris and Laughlin UFO conference, I don't have the information offhand right now, but I'm going to be there, and I think Russell Targ's going to be there with remote viewing. I'm going to be giving a talk on remote viewing, the military, and industry. So I think I've got a lot of material to show. So that's sort of the next big conference coming up in November, at the beginning of November.
That's one I definitely will not miss. Well, thank you so much, Angela. I will try to stay in touch with you, and for everybody, watch Friday. Her interview with the History Channel, The Unexplained Mysteries of the Mind, premieres Friday, August 30th at 10:03 p.m. History Channel. And this is through Prometheus Entertainment. Great group of guys. Check it out. Thanks for all you do. It's rigorous how much you put into this area, and it's a challenging area. So thank you so much, Angela. Appreciate all you do, and just for being a hero of the cause in every way.
Well, thank you for having me on your podcast. Thanks, Ryan.
Take care. Bye-bye. Man, as good as it gets. As good as it gets. And I'll tell you what, on this planet, as many years as I've been here, which isn't that many, it's 44. I guess it's a lucky number, but it's, hard to come across people of that quality, caliber, and just genuine good people. Angela Thompson Smith is one of the kindest, most amazing souls I've come across. And I know I'm not the only one that says that. She is something special, and she's something special to a lot of organizations, a lot of individuals. And historically, she has given back to every community and institution that she's been a part of. And so please support her work. Angela Thompson Smith PhD. Check out MindWise Consulting out of Boulder City, Nevada. I took her course. It was epic, mind-blowing, and I highly recommend you do it as well. Your entire vision of reality and the control that you have upon it will change. Your predistinguished, barbed wire will disappear. The things that are holding you back, consider those gone, because once you get into remote viewing, you realize that the mind's eye is a lot more powerful vehicle than generally accepted by science. And definitely check out everything she does. Purchase her books, even if it's one or two. They're all excellent. And until next time, stop by HEROparanormal.com, pick up a hat, a t-shirt, go to HEROparanormal.podbean.com or HEROparanormal.com, hit the donate button, hit the subscribe button, become a patron. You get patron-only content that is just amazing. It's the masters of the masters, and it's really Hero Paranormal is just the best of the best that I can grasp. Not always the easiest thing to do, but I do my best, and it takes a lot of time. So if you can help us out, it would be highly appreciated. Go to HEROparanormal.com, hit donate, subscribe. Go to HEROparanormal.podbean.com, where there's a bunch of free content that you can download. And with Podbean, you can like hop on a plane, it's there, boom, just like iTunes, which we're getting on soon. And just do the same at HEROparanormal.com. Go to spacewolfresearch.com and see where we are doing our research. Just there, right next to a hotspot, unlike any other hotspot, which if people haven't heard about it, they will soon enough. Support us in any way, shape, or form that you can, and maybe get some cool swag in the meantime. And you can wear it, sport it, and you know what? Be the coolest guy on the block because you're into something other people just have not opened up to yet. And speaking of that, on our next Hero Paranormal podcast, we are going to hopefully have... there's no hopefully, it's happening. We're going to have the most amazing researcher that I know of, who is the first of the first on property at the old Sherman Ranch, the property adjacent to our own, Space Wolf Research, only yards away. And by yards, yeah, there's a few, and that's a good thing because the area in between is more or less the area where all things have retreated to or come out of that have been considered either dangerous, paranormal, abnormal, or from a cryptozoological sense, something to be ascertained and reported. So, lights in the sky everywhere, bridges everywhere. There's so much. Anyway, to get back on topic, that's where we're doing the podcast. We're going to have Mr. Ryan Layton, first researcher in the area, to spend time overnight talking to Terry Sherman, having a barbecue, popping a couple brewskis, checking out the property, and going on the Magical Mystery Tour. We're going to have him and more right on site, just in the middle of the night when you'd expect it to be right, in Skinwalker/Shapeshifter territory. And what I mean by that is magical Native American witches, or lore thereof, and shapeshifters, whatever you want to call them, beings of the night, entities that we are studying, things that seem to be able to do things that regular creatures would not be able to do. We're getting lights in the sky, we're getting all kinds of stuff, we're getting carcasses piling up like there's no tomorrow, and we are having to pay for that research to get these things checked out. So anyway, hit us up, donate, whatever, pick up a t-shirt, and until next time, keep your eyes to the skies, feet on the ground, but don't forget to take a look around. Come blast off in my time machine, third eye feeling like it need Visine. Blast off, blast off, blast off, blast off. Come blast off in my time machine, third eye feeling like it need Visine. Blast off.